Hey everyone, it's Colin from Not Yet Adults. We're going to start the episode in just a minute, but before we do, I want to take a second to acknowledge one of our listeners. As many of you may know, Eric and I met during our time at Pacific Lutheran University, and while we were there, we were working on a show called Late Night. One of the people we worked with, by the name of Elsa, who's a close friend of ours, is going through a bit of a tough time right now. So, Elsa, if you are listening, we love you, we're thinking about you, and we hope things get better for you soon. To everyone else listening, just take a second today to hug someone close to you and tell them that you love them. Let's do the show. Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the Not Yet Adults podcast. I, of course, am one of your hosts, Collin Geffrey, joined by Eric Zayas, the one, the only, the one...
The one, the only.
The one, the only, the one, the only, the one, the only.
Although there are actually many Eric Zayases. There's actually one that follows me on Facebook. And did I ever tell... I don't know if I ever told you the story about the group chat. Like, randomly one day, I got a friend request from another Eric Zayas who lives in, I think, Albuquerque, Mexico or something. And I was like, okay. And then he decided to start a group chat with a bunch of people with the exact same name and the exact same spelling.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it was a really funny idea. And I got excited because it's like, oh, I get to talk to all these random Eric Zayases, or Zayases, how do you pronounce it? I should know how to pronounce my name, whatever. From all over the world. And then they all, because Zayas is a Spanish name, Hispanic name, they all started speaking Spanish. And I was like, oh, well, that's what I get for not being bilingual.
That's bizarre. Now, were they nice? Like, were they cool to hang out with? Or was it like a creepy serial killer Eric?
The Eric Zayas that added me from Albuquerque, he speaks English and he seems pretty cool. But all the other ones were just, I didn't know what they were saying.
Okay, good talk. I think I haven't done it in a while, but back in like middle school, I used to Google my name a lot. Just, I don't know why, because I was a dumb kid. And I think I'm the only Collin Geffrey out there that's spelled with a G. There's definitely Collin Jeffries with a J. But I think, because Jeffrey with a G is a pretty uncommon spelling.
Yeah, the way you spell your last name is really unique.
It's bizarre, man. I apparently it came from Jeff Rowe when they immigrated from like Germany or Italy or something. I don't actually know anything. But yeah, heritage, family, all sorts of stuff. However, Eric, heritage and family is not the topic for our episode today. What is our topic?
Great segue.
What do we... Oh yeah, great segue. Wasn't heavy-handed at all. What do you have for us today, Eric? What are you bringing to the table?
Today, I wanted to talk about teachers, or just educators in general, whether those are teachers, professors, tutors, what have you. The ones that impacted us, the ones that we remember, the best ones we've had through our lives, because I feel like the best teachers are really like memorable and they stay with you. And I just wanted to give a shout out to teachers and just talk about our like experiences with the ones that stood out to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great place to start. Do you want me to go first, or?
Well, before you go, I just wanted to explain like a little bit why I chose this topic. I had lunch with a teacher I haven't seen in 12 years. I think it's been 12 years. He was my 6th grade teacher, and it was a really nice lunch. He's really cool, and I'll talk more about him in a bit. But before I do that, I was wondering who your favorite teacher was and why they were your favorite teacher.
So I don't know if this is necessarily my favorite teacher, but it's definitely the one I think about the most. I'm going to talk about a guy by the name of Mr. Kohler, and Mr. Kohler was my 7th grade English and history teacher, and anyone who's met me for, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes will probably know that, like, I oftentimes, like, I don't have much regard for, quote unquote, the rules. Like, if I think there's a better way to do something, I'll do it. And I don't really, I don't know, put myself in a box or whatever you want to call it. And me in middle school, that meant that basically I was just going to stop trying in classes that I didn't feel engaged in. And so fast forward to 8th grade, I had Mr. Kohler again after having him in 7th grade. And I got a D in his English class 2 trimesters in a row. Because I turned in frickin' nothing. Like honest to God, like I turned in nothing. And my brilliant solution, being 13 and me, was, well, I'm just going to hide the report cards. No one's going to find out.
Always works.
Oh yeah, it always works. Nothing ever goes wrong there. And it worked for 2 trimesters. I got away with this for like 6 months.
Oh my God, Colin.
And by the way, kids, don't do this because this is terrible. I'm not. I hope it's not coming across as bragging because that couldn't be further from the truth. But to add insult to injury, I got a D the first trimester, and then I let it happen again. So I got another D the second trimester because I didn't turn in anything. And then finally, my sister, I think, who was in grade school at the time, comes home to give our parents her report card, and they're like, "Hey, wait a minute, where's your report card?"
Uh-oh.
And then they're like, "Actually, come to think of it, we didn't see your report card in December either." And so I had to come clean. I told them it was this whole thing. And Mr. Kohler, we had this big parent teacher conference, and there was this whole thing. And he was his reaction was really interesting because he basically was like trying not to laugh the whole time. And like, because to him, he basically said, and I don't remember the way he phrased it, and I wish I did because it was so memorable to me, and I don't know why. But he basically said, "Well, this is just Colin. Like, this is just the kind of thing Colin does." And he didn't mean it in a bad way at all. He just meant that like he was in a situation and he found a way to try and solve it where he wouldn't get in trouble. Like that's just kind of what Colin does. Which
Oh, that's very like he. I think you would. Do you mean to say that he said this was like expected based on your like personality?
yeah, and he didn't even mean like I'm the trouble kid or that I was like trying to cause crap. He was just like he doesn't feel engaged and he's not trying and he was going to hide the problem that he had because he's just a weird, quirky, outside the box guy. And it just stuck with me that in middle school especially, I feel like it's very easy to feel like no one understands you and you're totally on an island and you're one of a kind and you're like on a different frequency than everyone else. And here was someone that even though he had never vocalized it, I was like, oh no, he totally gets how I'm feeling about a lot of this stuff. Not once did I come to him and say, I don't feel challenged in your class. Not once did I come to him and, say I don't appreciate the curriculum. And despite the fact that I was acting out in a way that was very disrespectful, that I wasn't applying myself, I wasn't turning in the work, I was hiding my grades from my parents, he still could see the forest through the trees and be like, this kid's not an idiot. He's just doesn't feel challenged. And so he's, not trying. And I don't know, there was something just very powerful about that to me, that he saw something on paper that was a bad thing. It was a series of mistakes on my part, none of which should have happened. And he saw that not as a bad thing, but just as one aspect of my character. And he invited me after that to be his teacher's assistant for the last trimester. And I was like his teacher's assistant in his class for 7th graders. And I graded the papers and that was like a big honor because like you can only have one.
Interesting turn of events.
Yeah, it was. And like you could only have one teacher's assistant. So like he picked me over anyone else. But no, I just thought it was fascinating that, I mean, here's a situation where I effectively did everything wrong and he still could see the person behind that and not just the actions.
I was just going to say it's incredible that the amount of empathy that teachers have because they have to, because they work with so many young kids many times going through like a transitional stage in their lives, whether they're like teenagers or young adults. And oftentimes hormones and like drama that ends up not meaning anything or mattering in the long runs plays into that, and or just even personal stuff at home or a million different variables they have to like in order to effectively do their job, which is just to teach you. They have to see that these are just human beings that are trying to like that are affected by all these things that we can't even see. It's incredible to see a teacher use their empathy so effectively to understand the human being behind the name tag, so to speak.
But yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. In my position, like, I can't honestly say if I was Mr. Kohler, if I'd been the teacher in that circumstance, that I wouldn't have just written the kid off because he's like, well, he got D's in a row, he's not turning anything in, and he doesn't care. Like, why should I care if he doesn't? But he still cared, and he cared enough to be like, hey, not only do you deserve another chance, but I can see there's something here, there's a diamond in the rough, kind of. And yeah, I was just that was very humbling to me, and that's when I realized that just because someone doesn't say something or because someone doesn't act in a way that's obviously in your best interest, that doesn't mean they're not paying attention. And it doesn't mean that they don't still care, even if, they're working behind the scenes a little bit more than front and center. But anyways, what about you, Eric? What was your big teacher in your life that really you think about a lot?
Yeah, my most important teacher, I'd say, throughout my entire life was the one I actually had lunch with earlier today. His name is Mr. Furtado. He was my 6th grade teacher back in elementary school, where we had like one teacher for the whole day. So he taught a variety of subjects: math, reading, social studies, etc. And he stuck with me. Of all the teachers I had at Evergreen Elementary, the school I went to when I was a young boy.
Wait. You went to what elementary?
Evergreen Elementary.
I went to Evergreen Middle School.
What?
That's so bizarre.
This was in Spokane?
Yeah.
Wow,
that's bizarre. Anyway, sorry, keep going. I was like, that's crazy.
No, that's really wow. And it's funny that the teacher of all the teachers you picked one in middle school and I picked one in elementary school, and both of our schools have the same name. That's pretty cool.
Maybe they're brothers that like both took their wife's name or something. Like, who knows?
Mm-hmm. The schools?
Maybe. I don't know. I didn't think that one through. Go ahead. Sorry. Get back to your thing.
So Mr. Furtado, he was just back then. Evergreen Elementary School, or any elementary school, really, just that time in our lives when we're so young and this is the first couple years of school. Those school years dragged on. They lasted so long. They just felt like each year, each day felt like it took so much longer, and it was we were still learning a lot of basic things that it just felt like. It's kind of like how I talked about in the first podcast, how like our school years up till now just felt like the tutorial of life rather than the actual game of life, where this is like the beginning of the tutorial. This is like the first long stretch of that, and it was like everything was like black and white and gray and boring. And here's Mr. Furtado, who actually was so enthusiastic and energetic and just a warm, happy, positive person that he actually made me excited to go to school, which was like one of the first teachers that did that for me and showed me like how learning can be fun and exciting. And he was just this great man that years later he still stays with me. And I remember the reason I met with him today after all these years is because one of the last times I saw him back in 6th grade or around that time, he told me, come back anytime and we'll talk. And then like a year or two later, when I was in junior high, I met with him and we said hello. We had some pleasantries to share. And then he said again, if you see me again, it should be after you have your college degree. Now, that was like over 10 years ago. And I don't think he ever expected me to actually like meet with him again. But secretly to myself, I said, okay, you're on, deal. And so years later, I have gotten my associates from Pierce Community College. I have my bachelor's degree from Pacific Lutheran University. And I contacted him through Facebook, of all things. And we met up and had lunch, and we talked about our lives and what we've done. And it was this amazing experience. It was like this, it feels like the culmination of all of my, educational career, pretty much, in this one lunch. And I'm like kind of getting low-key emotional right now because it felt like this beautiful bookend to this like story. And it was a very like fitting end. I mean, it's not really end of anything, but it was just like this moment where I was able to come back for a moment and remember how I was as a kid and how far I've come.
Isn't it so interesting that someone will say something in passing that maybe they mean it, maybe they don't, but they're just kind of saying it, and for whatever reason that thing will stick with you for literally years, and you won't stop thinking about it, and then suddenly, in your position, you were like, what the heck, I am going to give him a message, and let's actually go out to lunch. That's so cool to me. That like something he said just for some reason resonated with you, and you're like, no, I'm going to follow up on this. I'm going to make this a real thing years after the fact.
Yeah, and it's also funny to think some of the things that motivate you, some of the smallest things that are, like you said, just something said in passing, that because they stick with you, they can keep you going. Some of the times at Pierce or at PLU, I was doing homework, working on an essay or something, and I would feel like tired, and I would consider quitting. Not all at once, but just thinking like, do I really need, a bachelor's degree? Do I really need to put all this hard work into like this piece of paper? And then obviously there'll be other motivators like family and like wanting to get a good job after college and wanting to not be a college dropout. But also there was just this thing in the back of my mind that said to me, Eric, if you don't get a degree, you won't be able to meet up with Mr. Furtado and brag about it.
Did you actually have that thought like during college? Because that's the coolest freaking thing, that like you had an actual tangible thing of like, I'm going to get to the other side so I can do this one thing.
Yeah. It's like, this is such a nerdy way of saying it, but it's kind of like in a video game when you, at the very beginning of the game, or also like any just like long story or something, you see how far it's going to be. You see kind of like, you get like a hint at the beginning of how long it's, like if it's a book, you see like how big the book is. And if it's like a video game, that like there's gonna be a final boss or something. And so at the very beginning, you like have this like sort of deal with yourself to an extent where like no matter how long it's gonna take, I'm going to get to the end. And when I get to the end, it's gonna be this beautiful moment where I get to close the last chapter of the book, or like defeat the final boss and get that cutscene or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? But this was like an extreme like life version of that, where years ago, I made a promise to him that I would meet him again with a college degree, and now I have that. And it was a really fun moment where we both just like sat with this like satisfaction, because I was satisfied because he, seeing him again was so meaningful to me. And he would tell me these stories that he didn't want to tell us when we were young, because we were too young to appreciate them. And it was all satisfying for him to see a student that he like remembered. I was surprised he even remembered me, to be honest. When I messaged him on Facebook, he like immediately was like, "Oh yeah, I remember you, and you were really respectful and nice, and you were a great kid." And I was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you remembered me." But it was that lunch was also satisfying for him, because he got to see like essentially, not to brag too much, but essentially a success story, like one of his students from years ago, doing well and making an effort to get into contact with him. So it was just this awesome lunch. And he, of all the people, there wasn't one single story I have with him that I remember, because there's a lot of stuff from my childhood that I don't remember too specifically. But I just have this general sense of like of positive memories when it comes to Miss Furtado in that 6th grade class.
Now I have a couple questions like right off the bat. The first thing, like, at least for me, maybe this isn't true of everyone, but I don't know. Even in college, I could never feel comfortable interacting with my professors in a casual sense, because there was always this sense of they are the teacher and I am the student. And regardless of age, I could never feel like I could just go get coffee with them or just sit down and have a conversation with them. So I'm kind of interested, what was the dynamic like when you guys went to lunch? Was it uncomfortable at all? Was it weird?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question, because at the beginning of the lunch, I was super nervous, and I was like almost awestruck, because it was like Mr. Furtado. He looks very similar to how I did back then, just a little bit older. But we were at a loss to say. There were a lot of like kind of not necessarily awkward pauses, but pauses near the beginning where we were kind of like figuring out like what to talk about and stuff. And like when he saw me, he's like, "You have to tell me your whole life story." And I was like, "Oh boy!" And so we like got lunch, got food, and then like I just started like slowly but surely telling him like a summary of everything I've been up to. And something I wanted to say real quick near the end of the lunch that he said that I think will like stick with me like right now going onward. He said that like this time in our lives right now is full of uncertainty, and that may be scary, but it's also should be a really exciting time, because there's so many possibilities for us now, and so many possible ways our life, or so many possible routes our life can take right now.
And just to clarify, when you say this time, you're referring to us as recent college grads.
Present right now, yes. That's something that like intimidated me, but also kind of was a bit of a comfort.
Well, and I feel like I mean, you mentioned comfort. There's something reassuring about someone who's been where we are now and who's made it out on the other side and can objectively look at where we are and be like, you're not going to sink. Like it's going to be okay, you know? And I feel like, at least for me, like when it's your parents or your family or whatever, like, of course they're going to say that because they're around you all the time. And what are they going to do? Like your dad's going to be like, hey, you freaking suck, Eric. You're doing really bad. Like it's not going to happen, you know?
You're not gonna make it.
But like your parents, of course, they're going to tell you you're going to succeed because like, well, what the heck else are they supposed to say? But when you hear someone else say it, sometimes that's all it takes to be like, oh yeah, it is going to be okay. And not that you and I are like in this terrible dark period of our lives or anything, but like you said, it is uncertain. Like we don't really know what tomorrow holds, much less, you know, a few years down the road. And so it is, I can only imagine, you know, how helpful that is to have someone just say like, hey, you're going to be all right. It's going to be okay. You're not going to sink. It's going to be fine.
Absolutely, and I feel like people in a teaching profession see a lot of young people like where they're, and they can kind of tell their trajectory from this one single point, whereas we, from our perspective, can't really know for sure where we're going to be in the next 5 years or what we're going to be doing, the kinds of people we're going to be. Teachers see people in those positions all the time, and they get to like they learn like based on how this kid acts while they're in their class, what kind of adult they're gonna turn out to be. And it's something he kind of talked about, saying like, you know, some students, like, you can tell based on their parents or based on how they act whether they're gonna, like, you know, do well as adults. And I think we both were just examples for our teachers of like kids that, you know, were gonna do well. It sounds like Mr. Kohler saw that in you, and I definitely know that Mr. Furtado saw that in me.
One thing it makes me think of, and like I don't want to get too controversial here, so like we'll just leave our thoughts about the movie out of it. But it's that line in Last Jedi when Luke is talking to Ghost Yoda, and he mentions, you know, like the burden of being a teacher is we're the thing they always grow beyond. Is the student will always surpass the teacher, not necessarily in skill, but just in life. That is the very nature of the relationship, is they will give you the tools to move past them. And that is so strange to think about, that like in Mr. Furtado's case, he's seen hundreds, if not thousands, of students over the years that he had for a year or however long, and then they just left, and he probably never heard from them again. And in your case, I mean, you had the initiative to, you know, meet up and check in years after the fact and see how each other's were doing. I just think that's so cool that, you know, he could kind of see, I mean, obviously, you know, hopefully both of us still have a lot more room to grow, but that he could see closer to the final result with your life of like, he did make it. He came out on the other side, and he's an adult now. And, you know, he's made it through a lot of the things that the kids that I'm still teaching, I assume, are currently struggling with.
That's very true. Like, it was like just a really, I've said this before, but I think it was just a really beautiful moment for both of us. I was wondering, I'm just meaning to ask you what kind of aspects about teachers or people in educational professions, what things about certain teachers kind of stick out to you and make them really memorable or impactful for you?
For me, I'm someone who gets very bored when things are always done the same way, and when there's an established order that's just kind of there and no one really questions it. So any teacher that likes to turn kind of the teaching or the classroom dynamic on its head, you know, I had a teacher at PLU, Vic Sweberg, that like he would just say weird oddball things, and anytime any part of the curriculum someone didn't like, he encouraged you to raise your hand and be like, you're wrong and here's why. And like he was just he wasn't attached to his ideas. He wasn't attached to the curriculum. Like if you hated something, he loved it when you were like, I hate this and here's why. And so just something like that, where you don't get too caught up in quote unquote the classroom environment or the teaching environment, and you really just make it an open area for weird, unconventional things. I think that's what I really enjoy. Is just kind of disrupting that natural order a little bit.
Yeah, that's really cool. That shows that teacher can really act on his feet really well.
Well, and the juxtaposition of that to, teachers that I know you and I have both had, which is they are 100% married to the curriculum and you are learning out of the textbook and only the textbook, and the tests are just uninspired and dull and they show no ability about you as a student. It's like that is such a painful experience to go through.
Oh my goodness, yeah, I definitely have experienced that, and it's like such so annoying because like you're going like if I was gonna be reading from the textbook and just taking tests based on that, I could have taken an online class, or I could have I could have been self-taught, although that's really hard to do. But
Well, and at the collegiate level, it's like, how many dollars am I spending every class to sit here and freaking learn nothing? I mean, I got so frustrated sometimes about that.
yeah, I just feel like if we're meeting a person, we have all these resources, and not just like the textbooks in the classroom, but like other students and a teacher there, a professor. Like we should be taking advantage of that opportunity and have more of a discussion rather than just like, oh, let's all, you know, look at all these notes from this PowerPoint from the textbook and then take a test.
What about you? What's something kind of in hindsight that was really memorable or something that you really enjoyed about some of your favorite teachers or classes?
Something I've noticed with a lot of the different teachers and professors that really stuck out to me that I really like is enthusiasm. When a teacher is excited to be there, that sort of energy completely rubs off on the students. It makes them excited to be there, and I feel like that like supercharges them and makes the learning experience a lot more engaging and a lot more seamless, as opposed to teachers or professors who are like sort of tired, or they keep coming late to class, or when they're there, their heads in the clouds, or they're not really like maybe not heads in the clouds, but like they're not really excited to be there. I just really like the teachers who have like a lot of energy with them, like Mr. Furtado had, and a lot of some of the PLU professors that I can't remember specific examples, but there was definitely some that really made me go like, wow, this teacher, like they're a beacon of light in what could just be like an otherwise dark semester or something of this like curriculum that maybe it's not even part of my major, or maybe it's not even like something I'm really excited to be learning, but I'm going to come to class and be excited because this person that's like the figurehead of the class is motivating me. That's the sort of thing that stuck with me.
Well, and in the same vein of enthusiasm, I mean, having a teacher that just cares about you, like which sounds so simple, but like how many times have you and I ran into teachers that just could not be bothered to care? And like how discouraging is that as a student when you probably don't even really want to be learning what they're talking about, especially in lower level classes, and the teacher just could not possibly give a crap. Like that's so hard. And so to see that enthusiasm, like you were saying, and for them to come in every day with a smile and a level of energy that just made you want to learn. I mean, there's few greater gifts a teacher can give you, I think, than just showing, hey, I care about this enough to show you I'm excited to teach you.
There's a certain personality that a person needs to have to be a really good teacher, and I think that that kind of personality is a sort of person that really gets excited about teaching someone a new thing. And my mom's a teacher. She's taught at Tacoma for like third grade, and I think most recently she's going to be teaching first grade pretty soon. And I've seen her in the classroom, and she just like has this, it's not necessarily like she looks like a different or acts like a different person, but she has this sort of like it's like almost like she's playing a character when she's a teacher. Not that it's not her, because she's definitely really excited, and like teaching is something she's wanted to do her whole life, but it's just that she gets so into the experience of like creating the foundations for these children's mind, or these kids' minds, that she has like her voice gets like lighter, and her mannerisms become more like expressive, and you can tell she definitely is the sort of personality. She has that specific kind of teacher personality that works so well.
I feel like kind of in the same line of thinking of sort of enthusiasm and sort of playing a role as a teacher, I feel like there is a line you have to kind of walk between in terms of not being too enthusiastic to the point where it comes across as being fake. Like, I feel like there's a difference between being energetic and being caring, I guess, if that makes any sense. Because I've had teachers that were just way too over the top. It felt like they were playing a character in a movie, and I was like, I just can't take you seriously. This is just too much. I feel like, at least for me, that's not to be confused with someone who shows a level of caring for your learning. I feel like there is a little bit of a gray area there. But yeah, that is interesting. You kind of mentioned your mom like playing a role, and that is interesting to think about. Of like, we think about teachers typically only in the context of them teaching us, but outside of that, they go home, they are, presumably married or have kids or have social lives outside of it or whatever. They are just people, and we're so conditioned to see them through just one lens, it can be easy to forget that.
Very true.
Well, Eric, I feel like we're getting towards the end here, and typically at the end is when we give everyone the propaganda of all the places they should go follow us across the internet. Before we do that, is there any closing note you want to give just on the subject of teachers or anything we talked about today?
If there's one thing I have to say to like people like still in school, maybe you're like not super excited about like being there, and maybe you like are one of those people that like thinks that teachers are the enemy. I just want to remember that their whole job is for you to succeed and to help you succeed, and many of them like really, like Colin was saying, there's so many teachers that care, and those are obviously the best teachers. And you just have to remember that these teachers who are also human beings that we sometimes forget because we only ever see them in a certain role, just remember that they only want the best for you, and don't think of them as the enemy. Think of them as like your partner in this journey that is, education and school.
And I hope it doesn't muddy the waters a little bit, but just to kind of be the yang to Eric's yin for a second, you are going to come across teachers who just don't work with you, and who just maybe it's a personality, maybe it's the environment, whatever. But for whatever reason, there are going to be teachers that you just don't enjoy as much. That's okay. Don't try to get too hung up on that or think it's something that you did, or maybe it's something entirely out of everyone's circumstances. But don't get too down when you find a teacher that doesn't work with you. Just work hard to find the ones that do. And when you do, make sure you hold on to that, because that's a special relationship, and those are the things you're gonna go have lunch over 10 years after the fact, and then you'll have a really good story over it. So, alrighty. Well, folks, this has been episode 8 of the Not Yet Adults podcast. I'd like to thank you for listening or watching or beaming onto your smartphone device wherever you are. We appreciate however you listen to the show. Remember, the show goes up every Monday and Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube, SoundCloud, and other podcast services like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher. We're also all across the social medias on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Not Yet Adults. We also have a subreddit, r/Not Yet Adults, if you want to check us out there. We'll be back Monday, 9 a.m. Pacific time, talking about something new or something old or something borrowed or blue or whatever the heck the wedding thing is. I don't remember what it is. But until next time, thanks for listening.